So I was up late last night rewriting my presentation, and I went to bed at 6:15 and got up at 6:30 because I had to get slacker. I know, that's what happens. And I'll mention a few things about being a slacker in a little bit, but I'm actually not going to talk anything about what I'm going to be presenting at my 2 90-minute sessions today. Those will be talking about roof flashing and stuff like that. Justin and I came up with a topic, I don't know, like 4 or 5 months ago, and I don't think either of us had a clue what it really meant. It was coping with the building material revolution. So, I mean, there's so many ways to go with that. I just took one path and we'll see where it goes. First off, I've been an AARP card-carrying member for almost 20 years. So that entitles me, I think, to reflect on what building materials I had available to me back when I started in construction. The choices were pretty easy. Was it going to be pine plank sheathing, or was it going to be plywood? Was it going to be tar paper, or was it going to be, at the time, a big thing that which was available to us, and at least in my local area, was aluminum face craft paper, which was actually a big mistake. And that would be for our weather barrier on the outside, and even for roof underlayment. Was it going to be 2-inch bats for insulation, or was it going to be an upgrade to 3.5-inch bats? But then during the 60s and 70s, a lot of companies started developing products. And where I really noticed it was during the 1980s when these products started getting into the market and getting accepted. And then during the 90s and into the 2000s, it's just been, straight out every day, every week, it seems like something new is hitting the market. New categories of products. And then within each of these new categories that never existed to us years ago, there were multiple selections, different companies providing their own products similar to other ones. The companies would promote their products based on, it's more durable, it's going to be maintenance free, it's going to be less labor to install, it's going to be more energy efficient. Nowadays it's going to have a lower carbon footprint, wider temperature range, stronger, lighter, you name it. And all of these new products have given us fantastic design options that we didn't have available years ago, and challenges as well. But that's way too big of a topic to start picking off on all of those. So what I want to focus on is something that's boring and mundane, but something that all of these products have in common, and that's installation instructions. So, yeah, how do you go from coping with the building material revolution to instructions? But they're super important. I want to focus on a couple of things. I want to focus on the importance of them, the roadblocks to accessing the information that a lot of manufacturers present for us. I know I'm not talking to a whole lot of manufacturers here, but I want to enlist your support to be able to change some of this to the benefit of the manufacturers as well as our benefit. And then I want to talk about some of the shortcomings of installation instructions, and then how, not to be a downer on everything, to how to actually put installation instructions to our use in the field and so on. Most of the building materials that we're building with today, unless it's cut down or whether it's dug out of the ground, does not have a code listing. In other words, most of the products that are in your standard code book are generic products that fulfill some ASTM, another stupid testing method, fulfill their requirements. They're not the products that we usually build with. All of those products that we build with today are alternative products, is the way the code treats them. And because they're alternative products, the installation instructions become key. So let me give you a couple of examples. Oh, actually, let me start this way. This wasn't my actual presentation. What these are the installation instructions for the 2016 fine home building house that we built. So in order to build that house to comply with the code, I had to have the building code book, and I had to have and follow all of the installation instructions, 2 bins worth of instructions. I had to understand them and then be able to put them together in the field. So some of the roadblocks that I find in getting that information, not just for this job, for every job. Now, it's one thing if you're a production builder and you're building 400 or 500 of very similar houses. You can go through the process of absorbing all of that information of installation instructions because of the choices you made, and then dovetail that with the installation practices on the site. But most of us are going to be custom home builders, custom home designers, remodeling contractors, and other people in the profession. So every job is a little bit different. You may have your preferred products that you use from one job to the next, but there are going to be those selections that come from a designer or the selections that come from a homeowner that you're going to have to incorporate into that building, and then make sure you follow those instructions. Let me just read a section of this is from how the codes get sort of address the alternative materials that we use that aren't listed specifically in the code book. There are a lot of call-outs that'll specifically say follow the manufacturer's instructions. Vinyl siding's an example of that. But this was from a code commentary. Now, when you get the regular code book, it's about this thick, and most people they'll get this, and this is what they'll try to read, and it's it's difficult to understand sometimes if you're not familiar with the language. But you can also buy, and what I usually do is instead of just getting the code book, I buy the code commentary. It's actually this book and another book of the same size. And what they do is they'll have the description of the actual code, and then they'll have a commentary about many of the sections so that you can understand it. They put it in real language. It's not just in code language. And one of the sections, and I don't remember which one this was from, but it says, this chapter includes the necessary provisions for such a weatherproof barrier. In addition, and just as important, are the approved manufacturer's instructions. Just as important, the approved manufacturer's instructions must be adhered to. So it's pretty clear from that one little snippet, as well as the other parts of the code, is that these have become the building code. A lot of people talk about building codes as being a minimum standard. Well, then the manufacturer's installation instructions become a minimum standard. And these are, in a technical sense, things that the local building official can enforce. So we need to get hold of these, and we need to have quick access, easy access. I remember back when Blackberries first came out and they had an actual screen on them, and a friend of mine, Craig Savage, some of you may have heard of him, he was an industry, important person in the industry as far as getting information out there and developing conferences, and he was an early author in Fine Homebuilding magazine, I think going back to like issue 1 or 2. And he showed me his Blackberry, and he said, this must have been like 16 or so years. He goes, Mike, look at this. This is the future of construction. So you're going to be able to take your phone, stuff we take for granted now, you're going to be able to whip through, go to a manufacturer's website. You'll be able to download their instructions. You'll be able to look at a video of how to install their products right there on the job site in real time. That's happened in many parts, in many cases. But in many cases, the manufacturers are kind of falling a little bit flat on making that as seamless as it could be. So some examples. Some of the manufacturers don't provide installation instructions at all, or very slow at doing so. You'll go to like the International Builder Show, and you'll talk to all these manufacturers have brand new products coming on the market. There was one product that was really, actually a couple that were really attractive to me at the last IBS. And when I talked to the manufacturer, I said, when will I be able to get this? March, no problem. It was available in March, but there were no installation instructions on the website. The installation instructions are still not up on their website, and they're actually selling the product. And when you look at the packaging and the information that's provided in the packaging, which you would think would have complete instructions, they're pretty poorly written and not as complete as we would need to incorporate them into an assembly of different pieces and parts. Now, that's one of the big problems we have, is that all of these manufacturers' products, they look at their product and they're focused on that, and they're not focused on installing the products in the big scheme of things, the buildings that we build, the buildings that we remodel. navigating the websites is a real problem. This is particularly the case when we have these really big companies that have hundreds and hundreds of products. There's a couple of companies I go on their website regularly because I use their products, and I need to refresh my memory on their installation instructions, or I need to check them because I haven't used that particular product. And I'm on this web page where they actually have the product itself. I can see it, all the list of all the wonderful benefits and features. You know, it's all written by marketing folks. And then when it says resources or technical documents and I click on that, it often shifts me over to this just endless list with a menu of all the products they have and then all the other collateral. So now I have to sort through to find what it is I'm looking for, and it takes a lot of time, and a lot of people get frustrated by that, and they just say, ah, the heck with it, I can figure it out. And that's the way most of us have done it for years. So you just go and figure it out. But really, those instructions are important. So we do have to find a way to navigate those things. The one thing I hate the worst is when the manufacturers don't actually provide much in the way of installation instructions. They may have some crude information in their packaging that they send out with the product, like a little label, and it's like just some generic stuff, pretty simple. But you know that there's a lot more installation information that you need to know and that they have, or that is available. And what these companies will do is, and I don't know if it's because they don't want to spend the time to put together the information or because they want to just lean on an industry standard, is they'll say, refer to or install according to, and here's some examples I pulled off for Windows, ASTM E2112. Now, if you want to get that standard in order to install this company's particular brand of Windows, you're going to have to pay $92 for that. Now, if you belong to ASTM, you can get it for about $80, but it's still pricey. An engineered, now this is for wood flooring, an engineered wood flooring company. They directed me to follow the guideline, or follow the NWFA, the National Wood Flooring Association installation guidelines. Those cost $110. So in order to install that flooring according to their instructions, I have to spend another $110 to install their products. What's another one? Oh, this one, I actually bought this one because I do a lot of roof trainings, and that's what I'll be talking a bit about today at my 90-minute sessions. One of the major asphalt roofing manufacturers gives you the information on the back of a bundle, but it doesn't go into much detail, and you know there's a lot more stuff you need to know to really install shingles properly and flash. So they direct you to follow the instructions in the Residential Asphalt Roofing Manual, Design and Application Methods. And this will cost you $15. It's actually a bargain in the realm of standards that are referred to. So roadblocks to accessing the information. The other problem we have is poorly written information. And they're difficult to understand. I'm sure you've all experienced those, where you look at the installation instruction, you think, well, who wrote this? Either it was written in another language and then converted to English with like an automated translator because it just doesn't follow, or it was an engineer or a product manager who knew the product so well that they don't need instructions, and they skipped important pieces and parts in the middle. So that's a problem for us. I've often suggested to Fine Homebuilding that they actually set up a little editorial department, because they do such a good job both with their writing and actually the editing, because most of us who write for them, we're not professional writers, and our stuff is actually kind of marginal. And then the editors qualify it, they fact check it usually, and then they polish it up so it looks good. And then they have great illustrations. I've suggested that they actually form a little subsidiary that just provides manufacturer's instructions. They haven't taken me up on, and also doing the videoing. That Fine Homebuilding videos are way better than a lot of the quality you find, particularly for manufacturers who have a static person sitting there or standing there and just talking and talking like this. I shouldn't rag on I guess I got an opportunity. Well, I should do this presentation for a room full of manufacturers and see if anybody laughs. So I had the opportunity to write, a couple of manufacturers asked me to write instructions for them on 2 occasions. And in both occasions, I wrote some very explicit instructions, gave them some scrap art so they could have their art department or some art, person really sketch it up nice. And in both cases, they said, this is too long. It's 3 pages. Our installers are only going to read 1 page. So we got to boil this down to 1 page. I said, you can't do that. I mean, you need to have this much information. And most of us are not going to frown on the fact that it's going to take a little more attention to read a 3 or 4 page nice sequential installation guide than the quick and short 1 pager. So that's another problem that I see. I can go on all day with the problems, but I'll do just one, I think just one more with a problem, because this is one that is probably where even the good manufacturers have good installation instructions fall down. And that's on giving us the installation for the variety and the types of work that we do, the assemblies. I mean, every product isn't an island to itself. It gets built in and combined with other pieces and parts. When a car manufacturer designs a car, every piece and part is engineered to work together. So there's one engineering or design team that's doing that whole thing, so hopefully nothing goes wrong. We as designers and builders and remodelers are the ones who are the ultimate sort of putter together of figuring out of all this information and putting it and combining it. The manufacturers kind of limit us in a way because there are a lot of installation things that we would like to do that aren't the plain vanilla things that they intended when they designed it. There's, let's see, a couple of examples of that. Well, like say here's an example from manufacturer's installation instructions for siding. Siding must be fastened to studs that are spaced 16 inches on center. Okay, so what if your studs are 24 on center? You're out of luck. You can't use their product. What if you're doing ICFs? What if you're doing a SIP construction? What if you're putting, it goes on, their instructions go on, the fasteners must penetrate studs by 1.5 inches. So what if you're putting exterior insulation on? So you got to strap the wall with some furring, and then you got to put the fasteners. Now usually when I strap my walls, I'll do it with some 1x3 or 1x4. I don't put on 2x stock, but if you're going to use this manufacturer's product, I guess you're going to have to put 2x stock on, because you're going to have to make sure that fastener goes in 1.25 inches. But is that 1.25 inches into the furring strip adequate? Because it says 1.25 inches into the studs. There was a deck guardrail system that I looked at. It was nice design, really intriguing. I wanted to use it. And I looked through their instructions, and many of the companies are like this. This is just a little snip of one of their final parts in the installation instructions. The structural guardrail posts supporting the guard system are outside the scope of these instructions. Guard posts to frame connections should be designed by a registered professional engineer to meet the test load requirements of AC 174, AC 273. AC, those are acceptance criteria for the ICC evaluation service, which again, you have to pay money to buy those. So basically, now you buy the railing system, and it kind of ends up in this gray area between a negotiation with you and the local building official on how you're going to connect those guardrail posts. Some other manufacturers go a little bit further, and they actually give us some connection details, or they recommend going and looking at an alternative to the building code, or a sort of an accessory document like DCA 6. Some of you might be familiar with that. It's provided by the American Wood Council. When we did the Pro Home, where these instructions came from in, well, the FHB house now, back in 2016, Fine Homebuilding got a lot of sponsors for that program. So I had to use the products that we're sponsoring. And there were 2 manufacturers whose products had to come together. But they didn't, neither of them had an installation detail which would account for the other product. So I got on the phone and talked to one company, got right down to the technical representatives, the engineers, did the same thing with the other company, went back and forth between them, including a short conference call, went back and forth for 2 weeks, could not get us to resolve to be able to use this product with this product in the assembly that Mike Maines had designed. So I had to go to an alternative the one product so it wasn't a big issue. It was just like, this happens all the time. I needed the companies to back their products up and help me out. Now, Steve gave a really good example of that. He told me he was going to nap here in the front row while I was talking, so I don't expect anything different from him. But last night he gave us a good example of his experience when he was doing the floating floor over the foam without no concrete with Huber and Advantech. That's a company, and a lot of companies do this. They'll work with us to make an assembly work. And it's not just because Steve is Steve, and when he talks to Advantech, because he has a relationship. I'll frequently call a technical line, and I don't tell them who I am or anything, and most of the technical people don't know. It's just the marketing people or the sales people who know who I am, just because of my association with fine home building. And a lot of them are really helpful. But sometimes the companies, it's either a culture or they just don't have the department to do it. They don't support their products fully. As progressive building performance-focused designers, builders, we see all the potential in these new products, but we're kind of held back because we know the risk that we take on if we don't follow these manufacturers' instructions. Not only is it a risk from the building code standpoint, it's also a risk on the warranty side. Some of you I know are from Rhode Island, and you may not be aware of this, but we have a contractor registration. It's kind of like a license is for contractors in Rhode Island. We just all have to get registered. There was a proposal in the state 3 years ago at the legislature. They would impose a 9-year warranty on all new construction and remodeling and repair work. Because of the way Rhode Island's registration is, companies don't get registers and LLCs can't be registered. It's the actual individual. The name, even though my company's listed on my registration, I am personally responsible. This law would have meant, there's one state, and I forget which one it is, has done the same thing or similar thing for a 10-year warranty, defect warranty. It's New Jersey? Okay, so it's 10 years. If that had passed, if anything had gone wrong with a project, and we can't account for everything because we're putting these assemblies together, then I would be personally on the hook. Now this isn't dead, it's going to keep coming up year after year, or not every couple years in Rhode Island. And one thing that Martin pointed out yesterday that I hadn't thought of about regarding manufacturers, that a lot of them in their instructions just promote bad practices, practices that you wouldn't feel comfortable using and that we just have known for years that just don't work. So there's another point to make there. So I need your help. I need your help and manufacturers need your help to actually get them on board. Don't just write off a manufacturer because they don't have good instructions or they don't have great support. Talk to the people. If you're at an event like this and you see some exhibitors and you like to use their products and you've noticed that their instructions are a little weak, say something. Say something to salespeople, say something to the marketing people, and if you're ever at one of the shows and events where they actually have technical people there, talk to the technical people and tell them this is what we need, this is what we want, because it helps us, particularly in the case of making their products assembly friendly, in assemblies that they may not be familiar with that you use regularly. Say it's a double stud wall or it's a situation like I mentioned with the furring. The companies that are good, thank them. It goes a long way, and that does not just in the case of thanking them for having good instructions, but having good products. You can thank them, we buy their products, we use their products, they're important to our businesses, but thank them, physically say thanks for putting something out that's good. It does mean something to some of these people. Let's see. So what do I do to make sure that I'm covering my butt when I'm using these instructions? First off, I follow the instructions, mostly to the letter, and when I can't, if I have to deal with the technical people and they give me a design or something, I want something in writing from them. Not just an email, I want a technical letter from their engineering department, something I can take to my local building department if the building official has a question, or that I can put in a file folder and save. So if ever a question comes up, I've got some document to show that. I do a lot of trainings in Rhode Island for the building officials in the state, and one of the biggest complaints I get from them about contractors isn't that we do things wrong, it's plan submittal packages to the building department, particularly from residential contractors, not so much from commercial contractors. They complain that I look at these plans and I just can't figure out what's going on. Submittal packages, I mean, if you go to chapter 1 in the code book, it's pretty explicit. There's a lot of information that you should be including if you're going to be getting a building permit. Part of what I do, and because of the fact that these manufacturers' instructions end up being, these manufactured products end up being alternative materials that the local building official can either allow me to use or can deny me using. I had a case once years ago, actually, I shouldn't say that. A friend of mine works in a part of New York where at the time, this was only like 5 years ago, could not use oriented strand board, would only allow plywood on any house construction. And they had the authority to do that because of the way at the time the codes in New York were adopted. So they do have purvey over what we use. What I do in my plan submittals is I write a narrative explaining the products I'll be using that may be unfamiliar. Now, if you're using a house wrap that's been around for 30 years, chances are the code officials are used to it. But if you're going out and if you're an early adopter, like I tend to be, you end up grabbing products that have some performance characteristics or installation systems that you really like the idea of. So what can happen is if the building official isn't familiar with it and you don't present it to them up front that you're going to be using this, comes time for inspection, and all of a sudden you find out they deny you to use that product. And all of a sudden this new roofing material you've got up there and you're like, what do you mean I can't use it? It's, you know, got an evaluation report from this association and organization and all this, and nope, can't use that. And technically they have the authority to do that. So I like to be right up front with them. So I give them a narrative, I give them a resource list with all of the URLs, because one of the things that is in the code book, R106.1.2, under the section called Manufacturer's Installation Instructions, the brief part of it, it says, shall be available at the time of inspection. So technically, I see a few nods of heads, some of you are aware of this, all of these instructions for all the products we use need to be on the job site at the time when you get that building inspection. Now, most inspectors are a lot more forgiving, and they let us, you know, if something they're not familiar with and they want to know about it, they'll ask me for the URL, or I'll email them a PDF or something, so it's not a big deal. But if you get it to them up front, it saves a lot of trouble. I took a class yesterday afternoon with Glenn Mathewson, and even though I'm pretty much a code geek, I learned a few things from him. And one was one in the 2018 IRC. I know a lot of states haven't adopted this yet, but he pointed it out as a sentence you want to be aware of, especially as your state starts to adopt this. It's under alternate materials, and again, it's in chapter 1, a chapter most contractors don't go to. Where alternate materials, design, or method of construction is not approved, in other words, if you present a product that you want to use in construction on a particular project, and the building official says, no, you can't use it, it says here, the building official shall respond in writing stating the reasons why the alternative is not approved. Up until the 2018 code, they could just say no, and then you say, but why? And no, and they could do that. So, you know, that makes a difference there. So even though you may not have adopted it yet, it's something available. Another thing, and why I have these things, installation instructions saved from 2016. Actually, I have them saved from a long time ago. Sometimes this is backup support. Installation instructions change all the time. And how many of you remember when we used to X-cut the openings in our windows and doors, right? And you folded it in, and that was the written instructions. Well, go try to find that instruction right now. But what happened if you had done that in the early 90s when that was still common practice and in the manufacturer's installation instructions, and you had a latent callback due to that, and you got nothing to stand on because you can't find that installation instruction. So I save them all, and that way, if in the future I've got a problem, and you know, when I was younger, I flew by the seat of my pants like a lot of us, but as you get older and you get burned once and burned twice, and then you say, I'm not going to get burned anymore, by having that piece of paper, it makes a lot, it gives you a lot more standing when you're up against an aggressive attorney. So, you know, it's unfortunate that that's the way a lot of construction litigation gets solved, but, you know, to have the documents helps. Another thing I just found recently, this is from 2 houses that I built about 25 years ago. Again, the risk of being an early adopter. It was when PEX was starting to enter the market. I mean, now we take it for granted for plumbing, but I used a type called Kitec, and it was a PEX product. And building failures around the country due to the problems they had with it, and there's a class action lawsuit. But in order to apply for the class action lawsuit and get some payments, though it won't cover the whole replacement, it'll cover part on these 2 houses, I could pull up the installation instructions, I could pull up the actual invoice that I had from the original purchase, and I could pull up the check that I paid to make the purchase, because part of the things, this was back before the electronic things too. I pulled up, because you have to prove that the product was installed in the houses. And I said, I know I've got that somewhere, and of course I've got boxes. Anyway, I built a 28 by 24 foot garage, and the whole 2nd floor, upper level attic is basically full of all of my documents. So digital or print, you can save them. So those are my advice. Now I want to take a sidebar. This is off this topic, I'm pretty much done with that. And I know I beat it to death, but I figured, anyway. And this is kind of reflecting a little on what Christine mentioned about the importance of education. And the great thing that all of you are here and participating in this. I think you'll agree with me. Now, I don't work for Fine Home Building. I'm just a carpenter and hammer swinger like most of you. I think you'll agree the folks at Fine Home Building have really done an outstanding job putting this together. I watched several months ago when Justin was putting it together, and he's going through lists of who he was going to invite as presenters, and he was being very particular because he wanted to draw the best of the best for the presenters and have an array of information that would draw an attendance that would be diverse and have opportunities like the time between our sessions and the meals so that we could meet each other and talk, because that's the, I mean, for a lot of us, that's at least 50% of being here is meeting and talking to other professionals. You know, Justin, Renee, who is the publisher, other people behind the scenes, like Marty, who I just met, and she's just like puts the whole thing together, and then Maureen, who got mentioned, she's like, if it wasn't for Maureen, the editors of the magazine would just, they wouldn't know what to do day to day. She keeps everything going. It isn't just a job for these folks. Sorry. I've known them for a lot of...
Love you, man.
That's what I mean. So, it's weird. My wife tells me, you're such an unemotional dope, you know? You know? It's like, don't you ever show emotion about anything? Yeah.
Only about Fine Home Building?
Thanks, Jake. So, you know, I know all of them personally. I've known them for years. I've known Justin since he was this big, and he was an intern. And they sent him out as on his first photo shoot with me. They used to send the new guys out to see either me or Rick Arnold, because Rick was my business partner for years, and we did a lot of writing. So they knew if they sent out the new guys, we knew what we were doing, so we could like say, take a picture of this. It's really important. They take all this stuff personally. Both the people that are on the front end that we see, the editors, and also on the back side, they're personally invested in the building industry, and they do a lot to help us out. So, you know, again, thank you, guys. It's you know, appreciated. And also thank all of you for coming. I mean, I can make more money at home. I could be relaxing at home. I come here because this is fun for me, because I get to meet a lot of people, and because I think it's really important that there are people like all the presenters who are actually giving out information, because I know some of you, and I kind of encourage a few of you to write magazine articles. You've got good ideas. You know, none of us is as smart as all of us. To present. And over the last few years, I've met a lot of people actually starting along that path, and that's great. To make this event a success takes all of you. Hopefully this won't be the only event that Fine Home Building has. Tell your friends so that they come next time. The magazine and the website sort of industry in general, media in general, is having a hard time right now. So we need to support the media. Martin talked about this yesterday. I want to just re-emphasize that. We've got to support them by buying the magazines, by subscribing to the websites, and by telling other people. So when you go back, whether you tell your competitors, or tell your lumberyard dealer, or whoever, tell them what valuable information you can get through the different resources that Taunton Press puts together. Yeah, it's hard to break through all of that, you know, information that's on the web, and I think that Fine Home Building has really done an outstanding job over the years. So support all that. Anyway, that's enough. I'll be doing the presentations on roof flashing in Salon 2, which is where we had dinner last night. Thank you all. I know I took longer than I probably should have, but I wanted to say all that.